Good evening. Hello and welcome. My name is Stephen Antonio, and I'm the Director of Family Engagement. We are here with you live for another great conversation about mental health. Tonight's conversation will continue our conversation we had last Thursday, which was about self-care and isolation, preparing for winter with COVID time. And tonight we're going to be talking about making meaningful relationship. Does physical distance equal social distance? And I have to say that this is the perfect time for this conversation because a lot of places around this nation are closing, issuing mask mandates, closing restaurants and bars. So we are in a second wave, sometimes a third wave during this COVID. And so we're having a conversation of the time in the time. And we have one familiar face and one new face that was going to join our discussion tonight. Our first one I'll introduce again is Lucian Coyado. She's a licensed independent social worker. Welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you? I'm
Good.
happy to be back.
Yes, it's so great to have you back. Last week we talked about your endorsement, I think, of Hawaiian pizza, pineapple on pizza. And in your bio, you also talked about spending time with loving animals. And so what is what's your favorite animal? Is it a dog?
So I love dogs, but my favorite animal is an elephant. Um,
Elephants.
like I tear up when I see videos of them. Like in college, I used to watch live feeds of them while I did my essays. Like it was weird, but I love them.
That's
But I
great.
also love dogs. As much as I'm allergic to them, I love them so much.
Oh, you're a trooper to be allergic and have one. And I just found out today, maybe this week, that in India, they permanently released a whole bunch of elephants that used to have tourists ride them. And so they're permanently free. So there you go for pro elephants this
Already
week in
tearing up.
news.
I'm not kidding. Like I'm already, that's so beautiful.
It's awesome. It's a great photo that I saw. And our next expert is Dorika Cunningham. She's a licensed psychiatrist. Welcome and good evening.
Licensed psychologist.
Psychologist. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I messed that up with Christine last week too. And in your bio, you said you like to spend time with your daughter. So what is your favorite activity to do with your daughter?
We love to sing and dance. We like to get moving.
Nice.
So she loves dancing as well.
Is there a certain song that she loves to dance
Not
to?
a certain song, but she loves soca. So the
Oh, okay.
Trinidadian kind of music is what she
Very
loves. Her
cool.
dad loves it too, so that's where she gets it from.
There you go. Now, who's a better dancer, you or her dad?
Well, I no need to place value on who's better. We're both
I don't
good.
want to start an argument.
Both
Okay,
good.
okay.
Those who are at our wedding know how good we are.
Okay. That's amazing. That is amazing. All right. So tonight's topic is about making meaningful relationships after we had a discussion about self-care and isolation last week. So before we dive into that, can you guys just talk a little bit more about your professional experience and what do you each do within your community? Anyone can
Yeah,
go first.
I guess I can go first. I have mine written on a post-it note on my desktop because I don't know why I always forget what I do, but I work as an individual therapist. I split my time between my own private practice that I run out of Lawrence, Massachusetts, and I also work part-time at Salem State University as a clinician at the counseling center. My experience has been rooted in working with children and their families. I transitioned into working with individual work, but I love working with all age groups. And my passion really is with working with those who identify as like BIPOCs. I think representation matters, especially in mental health. So I love being a clinician of color and working with clients of color.
Great. And Dorika, would you like to share?
Yes, so very similar to Lucianne, actually. I also do individual therapy, talk therapy. I know you all talked about that last week. I also really enjoy community engagement, as well as I'm an adjunct faculty at a couple of institutions. As far as my style and kind of the people I work with, I like to see myself as a flawed human who loves working with other flawed humans and helping them kind of, understand themselves, evolve, heal. Similar to Lucian, I have a huge passion for working with folks of color, really with folks in communities who are at the margins. A lot of my work has been around the intersection of race and culture and mental health and psychology, also the intersections of spirituality and mental health and psychology. And I really value relationships. I consider myself to be what's called like a relational therapist. The relationship is very important to the work that I do. I believe that relationships and connection can heal. So this conversation is one I love to have, that I have with a lot of my clients, how to kind of stay connected, maintain connections, understand yourself in connection. So I'm really excited about this conversation tonight.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I am too. I mean, we have heard so many good things about the conversation we had last week, and I know that this is just going to continue and going to be really great. So I really do appreciate you coming here and having that excitement too. I think that's going to be it's going to be awesome. So we're talking about time in COVID, and especially now with all these new closures coming down. So how can people maintain their relationships and social connections when we can't physically be together? How can we maintain those?
Well, I think, first, I think it's important to realize just the impact that the pandemic has had on our relationships. Our relationships have really changed. How we connect with folks changed. I think the first step is acknowledging and really kind of honoring the impact it's had on you. So being able to be honest about, how difficult it might have been. It has been really to be disconnected in a certain kind of way, and not to be able to be connected in the way that you used to. So I feel like that's kind of the first step, is like really seeing that and honoring that, being honest with yourself about that. But I'll let Lucianne share a little bit, and then we can kind of continue the conversation.
Yeah, to add to that, I would also say that normalizing the experience as well, because everyone is going through this. More people than not, I feel like, are social distancing, are really adhering to the rules and really and health regulations. But it's still hard. It's still hard when you miss like platonic affection. It's hard when you miss hugging your friends or your family members or loved ones. So I think kind of like normalizing and validating these feelings are coming about in a very not normal situation.
Yeah, and to kind of continue thinking about like how one might remain connected, I think one of the biggest things I see myself talking about with my own clients and the students I work with is really getting creative in how you can connect, and really seeing different ways of connecting as important and as meaningful. I think sometimes we can get kind of pigeonholed into one way of connecting. So a lot of people are Zooming and video calling, which is great, and also can be very exhausting. So just being open to the different ways one might connect, and being okay with, if you have friends, family, people who are close to you who connect differently than how you connect. So being okay with texting, being okay with Snapchatting, using social media, and really seeing those ways of connection as connecting. I think some folks might say, well, I don't like to text, I like to do a phone call. That's fine, we're all different. But I can tell you, I've had folks just in a simple text message and say, hey, thinking about you today. And that's been so meaningful to me. So if you can find meaning in any type of connection, I feel like during this time, I feel like that's really important.
That's great. Yeah, I know that my family is a huge hugger. And we haven't been able to do that since March, and so it's really tough, especially when we are looking to, when we do meet in a very socially great way, like in keeping our distance, and it's just really, really tough, especially for my mom, with me and my sister as well. But there's been a lot of things that have been missed this year. I know that I've seen a lot of things on Facebook about people's weddings being canceled and graduations in the spring and all that. So what can we do to navigate that impact and the grief from that loss, or those many losses that we might have felt this year?
Yeah.
I would say feel them, feel that loss, like that those things really did like happen, like missing those things really did happen. I know many people had to cancel their wedding or make like a small ceremony, change their plans. I know a lot of expectant mothers had to change their plans, their pregnancy plans. It's okay to grieve those things. Like you have to get through that feeling to get past it. Like there's no getting over sadness. You have to kind of get through it. Um, and talking about it, talking about how it might have sucked to cancel graduation your senior year of high school or your senior year of college. Talk about it, process it. I think you're going to find much more connection by being open and honest about those feelings than just keeping them in and pretending like it doesn't hurt or it's not painful.
Yeah. And I think something we've noticed, which is not surprising to those maybe of us in the field, but I think folks are starting to talk about it, is how the stages of grief really can be applied to a lot of our reactions during the pandemic, and with regards to our relationships. So just thinking about how grief is a process. Unfortunately, as much as we might want to rush it and we want to be at the next phase, the next place, and it is a process. And so you can easily kind of even Google information about the stages of grief and identify like, where am I at in this? And how am I being impacted by the grief of the loss of relationship in the way that it used to be. I also think different people grieve differently. And I think that's so important, because you can look at, the person next to you and feel like, well, they seem like they're okay, but know that they might be grieving just in a different way than you. So recognizing that, and if different people grieve differently, different people need different things in order to navigate their grief as well.
To kind of add to that, I would also say stepping out of your comfort zone and making that phone call. I know I've heard this so many times with so many of my clients, when we've talked about, okay, like who do you open up to? Who can you talk to? And many of them say like, well, I don't. I'm the one people come to. I'm the one who's always there listening and brainstorming and figuring out solutions or just comforting other people. And I think now more than ever, like we have to put ourselves in that place of needing to be heard as well and becoming vulnerable and figuring out what that means to you. Is it sending someone a text message? Is it making a phone call? Is it posting something on Facebook or tweeting? I don't use Twitter. I almost said twitting or something. But sending out like a funny meme, posting a funny meme on a story on Instagram, like reaching out. I think this is the time to practice vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lucian, I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like this conversation comes up often. Like I'm the quote unquote strong friend. Like you said, I'm the one folks come to, but I don't want to reach out to other people. I don't want to burden other people. And when folks share that, I oftentimes say, well, how does it feel when someone comes to you, right? There's something that you can gain from that, in the same way people can gain from you going to them and coming to them. And I say, like, what if your friend was struggling and you found out that that friend did not come to you for support because they didn't want to be a burden to you? And most folks will say, well, I wouldn't want my friend to not come to me. And I say, well, exactly. So, do the same thing. Reach out when you need it, because not only will you get something, but the friend actually will feel more connected to you as well.
Also, I want to point out that it is a huge myth that someone who is struggling with mental health cannot be there for a friend. I've also heard a ton of my clients say, well, like, I don't want to talk to my best friend because they're also struggling with depression or anxiety or grief or something. And I'm like, that is such a myth that they cannot handle whatever you have, like when you need to tap into that friendship. I think you'll find more often than not that they kind of want to be, that they really do want to be there for you. They want to kind of get pulled out of whatever they're struggling with and be there for their friend. They might not always, and I think it's up to that relationship to say, like, I can't handle this right now, but it's worth giving it a shot. And just like it is a huge myth that people with mental health challenges cannot be there for their friends and family and loved ones. So reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I know that this conversation is, or this time is really, I think, opening people to more options. What I what I see is that some people, went out to bars and hung out and were so busy because they were kind of hiding something they didn't want to kind of tackle. And now that there's not that there, that there are we need to kind of assess, and just to know that there are counseling and therapy, that's always an option for people. It's not necessarily something that is just made for those people. It's really just open to anybody, and so to know that that's okay, as well for people who are hitting it. And so I think it's, so what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is it just kind of both accepting that this is kind of the new normal, and or this is how it is, and then kind of find ways to still connect with people, and is that, like, it's okay to cry, and it's okay to have those moments where you feel probably the worst, and then because hopefully the good will come sooner. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, I think I love the metaphor that we're all in the same storm together, but we're in different boats. So I love to highlight the uniqueness that all of us have and the impact of this, be it on our relationships or just more generally. But we all are all in that storm, right? And so we all are being impacted and affected by this, again, to different degrees. But I think pretty much most people, I can't speak for the entire population on the globe, but most people, I think, can say this has been a struggle in some way. And I think the relational struggle has definitely been real.
Definitely
I also
agree with that.
oh, thank you. I also just want to talk to the people who are listening and watching online. If you have any questions about this topic, or even last week's topic, you can just write in the comments, and we'll have some time at the end to answer any of your questions. And know that we are live now, but we will have the video up for basically ever. So if you are signing on in the future, hello and welcome. But again, if you have any questions, please just write it in our comments, and we have our team who will give it to me, and we'll have our experts answer those coming in. So how, and especially now we're going into the winter and there's no outdoor eating and we can't eat in the park, and how can we still stay connected in a safe way to our friends and family?
Getting creative, I would say. Talking to your friends and family. I would say the first thing is identify who you want to connect with, whether it be within 6 feet or virtually, and then have a conversation with that group of people, like your pod, and talk about what are your boundaries, what is okay with you, what is not okay with you, especially folk living with other people. You have to come together and agree, like, who's allowed in your space and who's not allowed in your space. And if you exit that space, what are the expectations and the guidelines that you want to adhere to as a group? And then go from there. Talk about, like, if you want to hang out with a certain group of friends, or is that group going to get regularly tested? Do you know who they're going to hang out with? If you had plans, like making sure everyone isolates for 2 weeks, like create your own rules and be comfortable with them and set your boundaries and really have that conversation.
Yeah, I think the creativity is definitely going to be necessary. And in being creative, you just need, like I said earlier, a lot of different ways of connecting. I'll give an example of the creativity. So me and my family, that's located here in Boston, for Thanksgiving, we've decided that we're going to do what I'm calling like a drive-by food swap. So we're at least going to see each other from afar, swap Thanksgiving food. Everyone's going to, prepare a certain, portion of Thanksgiving food, and then go back to our homes and then do like a virtual call. That way we see each other, we have good food, and we can spend time with each other. It takes intentionality. You have to be very intentional. You have to plan it. You have to work a little harder. But I do think there's some benefit to us learning different ways to connect during this time. So yeah, getting creative is so important. And even, sometimes in stepping outside of your comfort zone, sometimes you have to take a little bit of a risk, and try something maybe that you thought you didn't like, something that you think is not your thing. Try it. A lot of times the preparing something and the about to do something is the part that we feel, when we feel the most like lack of motivation or feel more anxious about it. But once we're actually in it, we're like, oh, I like this. This is actually enjoyable. So getting, past that moment of, well, I don't want to go do it. Well, try it. Just try it out. And you might actually enjoy it more, than you think you do.
Awesome. We do have a question about this topic too, especially about the talking about boundaries. So there's kind of two questions about that. So how do you approach saying no to family or friends who want to gather in person?
That's such a great question. I feel like I've been in that boat
You say no.
since March. I think it really is like getting ready to have that difficult conversation when you know it's going to be difficult.
Mhm.
Do you need the support of a friend? Do you need a support of a partner? How can you approach this as just like, I love you, but, or I love you and I want to be safe. I want you to be safe. And I think something I've consistently kept in mind when saying difficult no's is I'd rather have someone be mad at me than have COVID or put us at risk when I don't feel comfortable. Or I'd rather you be upset with me for saying no than being with you and being visibly uncomfortable and not wanting to be in that space. And I think just finding other ways to be connected and finding other ways to spend time with one another. But I would strongly suggest like having someone to maybe role play that conversation. Like I come from a big family that loves a lot of hugs and a lot of physical affection, and to say no to that was really hard. Even like my family had to say no to me. I'm like, I've tested negative and I have a mask on, can I just hug my grandmother? And like I've had to hear no myself, and just being okay with that and not taking it personally, and know that it's for the benefit of both people or both groups, both parties.
Yeah.
I love the idea.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I love the idea of the role playing, especially if you feel very uncomfortable. I know that personally, I'm okay with asking, like, how many people are going to be there? Are we inside or outside? Like, who's coming? So I can kind of check their circle a little bit. But how do you, but the role playing, like, that is perfect for those who maybe don't feel comfortable asking all those questions to people, so that you can hopefully not get get the anxiety out of the way of them saying a no or negative. So I think that's great. We also have a shout out for that they love the food swap idea for Thanksgiving as
Hey,
well. So
I got some nice to-go boxes from Amazon just to make it even more easy and accessible. So absolutely. I was going to add to that because similar to the role playing, I'm a person that believes in alliances. I think a collective front is stronger than an individual. So if there's a family member or a person that is pushing up against those boundaries, if you have other people who can kind of stand with you in your family, or you and your partner, or you and some friends, whoever can collectively say, hey, like, we actually agree on this, that we're not going to engage physically, or we're going to hold this boundary. It's easier to do that with other people versus standing alone and doing it yourself. So I think that is really important and can be helpful as well. And I was also going to say, I also think this, idea of making decisions now that will, I think you have to kind of be a little bit more future oriented, and to like kind of to Lucian's point, see the farther distant future, and see the potential consequences and impact. And I think if you can trust that, feel confident in that, you will feel better about a decision when it comes to boundaries, and know that some folks have different perspectives. I think this is something that's come about in this pandemic, is that people have different levels of comfort. And though the extreme levels might be, we might have some judgments about, or risky levels might be different, but for the most part, we're all on a continuum, and we're all different. And that's okay, actually. We might be more or less comfortable than another family member or a friend with regards to what we're willing to risk, or just what we have to sacrifice, right, when it comes to any of the risks we're willing to be around. So I think it's important to just see that folks are different, and that's okay. So when that person is upset at you, you just have to remind yourself they have a different level of comfort, and it's okay. They don't get it, that my level of comfort is different than theirs, but I at least can understand that with them and say, it's okay for us to be different. This is my stance, and I'm going to stand on it.
That's a great point, because our second question was, how do you deal with someone who crosses your boundary? And it just seems like to have a really good and open conversation. And someone suggested in the chat to just kind of use I statements. Can you guys give it some examples of using that for people who might not be comfortable communicating this to family and friends, grandmas? And
yeah, I think what's coming up a lot with this idea of like who's more comfortable, less comfortable in boundary setting, is a sense of, folks not wanting to feel judged. So when you use the opposite, which are you statements, like you don't understand and you don't get it and you don't, you're being at risk and you're going to put everyone in jeopardy, that feels very judgmental and critical. And so when you use I statements, more like, what, it makes me very anxious. I'm very overwhelmed at the thought of us getting together in this way. When you do that, it takes away that sense of judgment and criticism, and it places it more in your experience. You can talk about how it feels. I think that's important. People normally can empathize with that a bit more than if they're feeling attacked. So I think that's why the kind of the I statements can be really helpful.
great. So yeah, it is. And they're coming in. So if you're watching, please keep up with your questions, ideas, and we'll definitely discuss it live right here. Did we talk about the ways of being safe? I know we talked about like staying creative, creating pods, and having that Zoom being fatigue is definitely real. What about social games? Is there any tips on kind of using technology to make this a little bit easier for people?
Yes, if you have pre-ordered this new Xbox or this new PlayStation and you have friends that also did the same, go for it. Join in, play online games. I know Jackbox.tv, like you can play video game, like quizzes and things like that online on your phone. Someone can share their screen so you're all looking at the same screen. Netflix Party, and I believe Disney hopped onto that train as well, like a lot of other platforms where you're not at the movies with anyone or like at your friend's house watching the same thing, but you can join these platforms where you can feel close and chat like while you're watching the same thing. I mean, I remember the days where I had to like call a friend and we both had Netflix and then it was a countdown, 3, 2, 1. All right, now we press play. But now there's a whole platform that will do that for you. And just having fun with it. I think people in the tech field are becoming so innovative and really responding pretty quickly to this pandemic and trying to get everyone to connect socially. So I would say do that. I know Instagram also has like reaction videos. Like your friend can put up a video about something silly they did, and then like it'll be on the bottom of your screen and you'll be reacting to it. And it's a fun way of interacting. It might not be at the same time or synchronously, but it's a fun way to interact.
Yeah. And again, I think this goes back to being creative and being willing to step outside of what you would usually do and what's comfortable for you. I think I hear a lot of folks say, well, it's not the same. Right. It's not the same. And we're not trying to make it the same. This is different, and we're just trying to adapt and adjust with something different. So try something different today. I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's not the same, but also say I'm willing to step outside of my comfort zone to try something different that might make me feel at least somewhat connected, because somewhat connected is better than not connected.
Great. Thank you. I think that I know that for myself, I bought a Nintendo Switch, and I haven't really played with people, but for me, it's just kind of a distraction. Especially like Animal Crossing, you create your own little world, and so you have to visit every day to make sure you get all the points and all the stuff. So that for me has kind of distracted just a little bit, and know that I can just take away from work, working on Zoom, I'll be on the computer just all day, just take a 15-minute break and be able to kind of do something stupid and fun. But do you guys have any advice for children, children helping them to stay connected and feel connected?
I think a lot of our conversation that we've talked about with regards to what we would do, I think it translates to children as well. I think the being creative, stepping outside of your comfort zone as a parent, and I think also finding opportunities, like in doing normal everyday things, to do it in connection with someone. So for example, there's times when I'm feeding my daughter, when I have her at night or on the weekends, and I do a FaceTime call with my parents, her grandparents, so that we can be connected, but it's in an everyday, situation. So finding those moments that you might connect with others, connect with other children as well, even in just everyday things that you're doing with your kids.
Anything to add, Lucian?
That was said perfectly. A lot of what we had said, does translate to younger children. I guess I would add, if you are a parent, maybe connecting with some of the parents of your children's friends and seeing are they a part of your pod? Are they someone that you connect with? And what are their safe boundaries? Different parents have different views on social distancing as well as video game time, right? Internet time. So maybe talking about the collective group and saying, all right, so do we let our kids play just a little bit longer? Are we okay with them connecting in this sort of way? And don't be alone in that. You don't have to be alone. You can reach out and just ask for advice or brainstorm as a group and see what works for everyone.
That's great.
I was going to say too, I think for, at least older children, I think it's helpful for them to see the vulnerability and the modeling of this is hard, this is difficult. So even having some of those conversations with them and just acknowledging how this is different, right? And it is difficult for many of us, and modeling and having that conversation with them, I think is really important.
Awesome. Thank you. So while some people are craving social connections and others are quite comfortable with the current reality of social distance, I know when this all started, I was like, I was made for this. I don't have to go to work. I can sit here and do nothing. But I know that is not the case for everyone. So how do we make sense of that? So some people are craving social connections while others are very comfortable with what it is now. So how can we make sense?
There's a continuum. I am against the belief that someone is either 100% an introvert or 100% an extrovert. I think it flows with day to day. I think it flows with situations. But understanding that everyone's comfort level is going to be different. And if you're thriving in your spectrum of being more introverted, then you are thriving. But make sure to just check in on those friends that do feed off of social situations. But balancing what feels helpful every day, is gonna look a little bit different. The sun is setting a lot sooner, but also TV is becoming great because fall season is here, winter season of a lot of shows are coming back. So how do you connect with people that way? Do you watch the same shows? Do you talk on the phone? Do you just text watching your favorite show? I think, again, exploring those boundaries, listening to your friends, listening to yourself, and figuring out a middle ground.
Yeah, I also was on the team. This is me, this is for me in the beginning. I just think for some folks, being disconnected in some ways felt like a burden was off of us. And I think that relates to some of the just like social pressure to be everywhere, be everyone's everything, always be on the go. So I think for some folks, having everything slow down actually felt really good. I also realized that some of us, and I'm saying some of us because I am a certified identified introvert, not a full introvert, but definitely identify with introversion, at least to some extent. But I think for some of us, we find a lot of renewal and like restoration in quiet time and time to ourselves. And I think that's real. I think for some folks, taking time to yourself, especially when it's intentional, it can be really helpful, and it can actually help you re-energize to connect with folks more. I think what becomes difficult is making sure that when you're taking time to yourself doesn't translate and then transform into isolation, right? So when you are taking time to yourself, you have to be really in tune with yourself that like, is this time restoring me? Am I feeling nourished? Am I feeling renewed? Or am I feeling disconnected, distant, and isolated, right? In the moment when you start to feel more isolated, that's when you need to say, okay, it's time for me to reconnect. I think I heard someone actually today in a meditation define loneliness as the desire to connect. So if you start to feel lonely, then that's like, okay, this isn't me time that's helpful. This is me needing to connect and reach out. And so then give that to yourself and connect.
That's great. That's so good to hear. Especially when you're kind of thinking of yourself of like, I love the to be tuned to yourself to make sure like what you know, um, who like to just self-express. That's just it's so great because I think that again this time is forcing people to kind of really look at themselves more because there's literally nothing else we can do. We're at a screen that points a camera to our face and we're looking at ourselves and but also just seeing what is I know with my friends we have never really been into Dancing with the Stars together, but this season we really did. We did like a bracket for who's going to win and who's not going to win, and the winner's going to the losers are going to buy the winner all their favorite candies, and we just live text during that 2 hours on Mondays, and it's just really a big highlight for us because we want to still be connected, but we want to be we want to be here for next year as well. So we want to make sure that we do that. And what's also great is too is I think we have always been honest with ourselves as friends, but this has just made us more honest to say like, hey, I'm not having a really great day, and just kind of reaching out to people. But I know that I'm blessed to have honest and great friends like that, and so I know that there are people out there that are struggling to connect because it's done in a different way now than normal. But Lucian, do you have anything else to add about the, between the two kind of waveforms of people?
Really check in with yourself, as Dorika was saying. I think this is a great time to do a lot of reflecting, listening to your body, whether you meditate or not. I think many things can be very mindful. You could do the dishes and be mindful, but really listening to your body as things get quieter around us, as as we're not as connected to other people. Reflect what feels comfortable, what doesn't. As Rick was saying, like, what is lonely? When am I feeling lonely versus like, when do I just want time alone? Being alone and being lonely are two different things, but everyone has a different rate of getting to one of those places. And like on that line of like loneliness to just like enjoying time alone, like, where are you on a daily basis and what do you need? And how do you communicate that need? If it is you need time alone, but you live with other people, how do you communicate that you need time alone? If you're lonely and you live alone, how do you communicate to loved ones or your chosen family or related family, hey, I need some family time, I need some love time, like, who can come over, or can we socially distance and see each other? If you have access to like a patio, or you're just bundled up in your parka and your hat and gloves and you just stand outside, how do you do that? And it's all paying attention to what your body needs and what your mind needs and what your feelings need.
Yeah, and accepting that folks are different, and not everyone in your circle. Some folks are struggling. Some folks are, basking in the in some of the distance, and that might shift, right? Some folks that were loving the distance a few months ago might be hating it now, right? So it can shift with time. It can shift across people. It can shift with context. So just realizing that, there those differences exist, and to not feel guilty or ashamed for wherever you fall on any given day at any given time, right? So just knowing that folks are different and it's okay to be different.
All right, we have a question. Thank you. We have a question from our people online. This: how do you make it meaningful day-to-day life when you're living with a partner, living with somebody, and everything is at home now? So how do you make those moments meaningful? Because you can't Zoom with the person that you're living with. So what is any tips about that?
Be intentional, keep your date nights. My partner and I think on Mondays we figure out what night of the week works best for date night, and then we pick that day. We either cook or order our favorite meal. The TV is off. I try to light some candles, but I also love candles. And by the time it's date night, my candles have all been died. They're done. um, Put a candle video on YouTube and just sit and connect. I think you can get creative in that sense. I think something I found really fun, there's so many lists on the internet, like questions to ask your partner. It could be funny questions, random questions, deep questions, weird questions, and just get to know them all over again. And then throughout your day, maybe creating some boundaries, like being okay saying, hey, I'm going to watch TV over here. I don't want to watch the show with you anymore because I'm not interested in it. So I'm going to be in this separate room, and just being okay not being in the same room all day, every day, and then being intentional about coming together at some point in your week and reconnecting with those date nights. Do you cook together? Do you order your favorite Hawaiian pizza? um, do you get a bottle of wine and just kind of sit in silence, or put on your favorite show or Netflix movie or something on the TV? Doing something like that, but make it meaningful to the both of you. You can do a puzzle together. You can play a game together. There's a lot of things you could do as two people, two-player games out there. But yeah, date nights.
Yeah, I think that being intentional, like Lucian said, being mindful, being really present is so important, because it's definitely quality over quantity, right? It's about the quality of the time that you're spending with your partner, versus how much time you're spending with your partner. So making sure, like Lucian kind of pointed to, making sure that when you are spending time together, that you are off of social media maybe, or your phone is elsewhere, right? Just making sure that you're really being present, and being in the moment. I think that's really important. And I agree with the creativity, with regards to, how you connect. Also realize that you can connect in very everyday ways. So like Lucian mentioned, cooking together, eating dinner together, I think is really important. I think something that I had enjoyed that I actually didn't necessarily do with my partner is just having our little, it was almost like he became my coworker. And so the same way I would go to some of my coworkers in real life and be like, guess what just happened? We were doing that with each other. And I was like, wow, I really like being your coworker, right? Because we're working together, in the house together. And so I think it's about enjoying those small moments as well. When you're feeling connected and you're like, I like this. This is different for us. We've never been coworkers before. Just really basking in the enjoyment of that.
That is perfect. That is perfect. Maybe you can set up a little water cooler, and so you can have some chats next to the water cooler.
Exactly.
Take the Brita out and put it on the counter and just chat by the Brita.
With those little small cups. That's great. And I think that's so great. And Lucian, thank you so much for this nice little segue too, because Mary Queen of the Apostles is hosting a marriage course, which in the name is not just about marriage. It's really about any couple who's been together for at least 2 years. And we did a pilot program in the fall to see how people's reaction, and they loved it. We had married a couple who has been together for over close to 50 years and some under 20 years. And so that's coming to Mary Queen of the Apostles in January. You can check out our website, mqoa.org/MC. And that's on Thursdays. It's about, I think it's 7 weeks together. And it's you and your partner picking a date night. And you're having a conversation with each other, not necessarily with other married couples. It's really diving more into the topic. So look at that, check that out as well. And we're looking, kind of looking at our community, because we're talking about family and friends when it comes to the holidays. We're talking about partners who are with people who we're living with. Is there any expert, any thought you can think of a faith community? I know, Dorika, you mentioned it in your intro about your faith community. Any tips to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think, oftentimes we talk about relationships, we think about peers, friends, family, intimate partners, but your relationship with yourself and your spiritual relationship, I think, are so important. And I think those are relationships that also need to be nourished. And so that can be a personal, individual, spiritual kind of relationship, but also, again, stepping outside of your comfort zone when it comes to connecting with faith communities and spiritual communities. And it can be tough because, again, it's different. It's not the same. And I'm speaking for myself. It's not the same. But being willing to try, the different ways that different faith communities might be attempting to connect with folks, and also be okay with connecting in the moment versus even the asynchronous connection. So I love to listen to a good sermon, on Sundays sometimes, even if it's not in the moment. I like to just listen to it and get the inspiration for the week. So that's another way to be connected as well.
And I think now that everything is online, that you can explore more. You can go into different churches, different faiths, and literally not be seen and just kind of test it out. Because I know when this first came out, my old roommate moved out to Chicago, and he sent me his church and online. And it was really great because it was just that pastor in his living room with his family singing and preaching, and I was on my couch watching it on TV, and it was really nice. So there is that opportunity. So if you are feeling, at least this is where I can speak of, because you two are very experts in the mental health thing, is that there is a part of us that wants to be fulfilled, and I think that can be done spiritually, and there's a lot of options out there. And I know that Mary Queen of the Apostles is a Catholic church, and we are sponsoring this conversation, but we are open to everyone and really try to just meet them where you're at. And we're not trying to convert you immediately or, get us into the club is all, but we just want to be serving people who are out there. And now in COVID, our boundaries are beyond Salem. So we're everywhere. And when we had a program in the summer, we had someone from Texas and someone from Maine join us. So it's been kind of exciting to do that as well, to connect to a community that is virtual now. Mm-hmm. We're almost done. We have about 10 more minutes. So if you're watching online, if you have some final questions, please comment and ask your questions. We'll get to them by the end of at 8 o'clock. But I have one more question for you too. So we've been talking about relationships of all sorts and sizes, people, but how do we take care of ourselves while we also remaining connected to others?
That's a huge question. I think I had mentioned it earlier. I think taking time to reflect, taking time to get to know yourself. What do you need? And being okay accessing what you need. If you are feeling burnt out, struggling with migraines because of all the Zooming, or you just can't talk to one more person, it's okay if you just need to take a day, take a personal day, take a sick day, and do what you need to do to just heal. I always suggest journaling, and sometimes that doesn't look like notebook and pen. It can be the notes app on your phone. It could be bullet points. There's so many things you could do. There's so many apps that you can track your emotions or your feelings. YouTube videos where you can meditate. You can put on music or a podcast that speak to you, right? There's so many podcasts out there that's not just like two people talking about like one random subject. Now I think there are a lot of more interpersonal topics being discussed, and also music is a strong way to connect to your feelings and how you listen to the lyrics. How do you flow with the music while you could be dancing, you could be doing chores, or you could be laying down and listening, but really paying attention to who you're becoming during this time as well too. This is a brand new chapter for many people that we're entering at the same time, and you might not be the same person you were pre March-ish of 2020, right? You're constantly developing, you're changing, you're adapting, and figuring out who are you now that you've adapted to this really weird time in history. So that is my advice. Really, take a look inward and see what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is such a good question because it highlights the importance of caring for yourself in the context of relationships. And I think this is a topic I'm very passionate about. I have it often, but I hear a lot of folks say, well, I know how to take care of myself. Like I know what I should be doing, but I'm just not doing it, right? There's some barrier to me caring for myself. And I think for a lot of people, there's this idea that like self-care, soul care, caring for yourself is selfish and it's going to take you away from your relationships. And I think it's important to realize that self-care is actually necessary for your relationships because if your cup is empty, there's nothing for you to pour out, right? You cannot actually pour into your relationships if you are empty, if you are drained, if you are exhausted. So really changing your perspective and attitude about self-care, that like, I need this in order to connect, taking time to myself and doing what I need to do to nourish myself, that's going to make me better for me and make me better for other people and in my relationships. So I think it's both and me and caring for myself and nourishing my relationships as well.
And speaking of self-care looks very different for different people, different folks. Often with my clients, I always hear like, I can't afford self-care. I can't afford that time. I can't afford to treat myself to a manicure, pedicure. I can't afford these facial masks. And I tell all of them, like, you can self-care for free. You can self-care at any time. Listen to what you need. Look at the things that bring you joy. Is it, yeah, buying like a really cheap mask at CVS or Walgreens, your local pharmacy? I'm not here to plug in like any of them, but like, what does that look like? Does it mean that you just take an extra hot bath or a hot shower and play music while you're in there? Does it mean that you play a book on tape while you close your eyes for a little bit? Or I mean, you pay for that, but maybe like something free on YouTube that you play while you just like lay down and listen. Self-care can mean anything to you. It doesn't have to look like what everyone else, especially on social media, is doing. I think sometimes social media is great, but sometimes it can look like things we cannot access. So I would say if you have a therapist, talk to them. If you have friends, talk to them. Like, when do you feel at ease? When do you feel like you're spending time rejuvenating and really healing? And that's what self-care is. It's healing from whatever energy you've just spent, and how do you gain that back?
Yeah. And I think it's important also that we hold each other accountable to taking care of ourselves. So in our friendship groups, in our family, in our intimate relationships, in our spiritual communities, that we take care, that we support each other taking care of themselves and take care of one another. We call it squad care as well. So making sure that you're checking in with folks like, girl, you good? like, I see you struggling. You seem like you're, exhausted. Maybe you need some time, right? Making sure that you're in relationships where it is celebrated to take care of yourself, and that you're doing it together collectively.
That's awesome. This is so great. I think that it's so sweet. With your time, when you're working with your clients, are people asking about big questions more now that this all shifted our brains a little bit?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of meta questions like, who am I really? I'm like, well, that's a really great question. This is our first meeting. Who are you? I'm getting so many more, many more existential questions, and half the time I'm like, I'm there with you. I have no idea. This is a great question. Let's keep rolling with this. Let's just keep chatting. And I think it just goes back to the relationship that, Dorika, you were speaking on earlier in this topic. And it's just like being human on the other side of like my screen. Some of the questions my clients ask, I'm like, this is great. I wish like I role played this in grad school, because then I would have had an answer for you. But to be real, I end up saying, wow, that's really interesting. I would have never thought that. I think it's challenged me to be vulnerable and much more humble in visits. And I love it. And I don't know, I love it. I don't know about you, Dorika, but these questions are getting hard.
Well, I think I even beyond COVID attract the clients with the big questions. I don't know what it says about my energy, but I love those existential questions. But they definitely have increased. And I think it's that we're slowed down. And when you slow down and you remove all of these distractions, you have more time to think about a lot of things, yourself, life, what this all means. Again, going back to how like grief and loss has become like a collective experience right now. Grief and loss is a part of that existential, questioning and conversation. So it's definitely coming up more. I also love it. I also am super, into the like, spiritual existential kind of, therapy. So it's definitely coming up, and I do like it a lot. And I think it's really meaningful that we're able to do this as like a collective. Painful, but meaningful.
You're muted.
Thank you. I was just saying, it's great to hear that that you love it. You two are loving the work that you're doing, and especially when the big questions come in. And here at Mary Queen of Apostles, we are hosting a 11-week series called Alpha, where you can kind of come and have a great conversation and ask big questions like, is there more to life? And it's really it's a small group kind of dynamic where we watch a video together and you just have a conversation after. And in that conversation, it's really, you can bring your doubts, bring your thoughts. You won't be judged or discouraged. You can put it all on the table, and really there's no wrong answers. It's just a conversation with people. And so we have done this for about 4 years at Mary Queen of the Apostles, and we're launching one in January 6th, 2021. It is on a Wednesday and online, and you can find out more information on our website. The link is in the chat. And it's really Alpha. It's where questions create community. So find more information at Mary Queen of the Apostles, mqoa.org/alpha. And thank you so much, both of you. This has been great. It's been so positive, I know, in our community, and I know that you have reached out to your communities as well and shared these both events with everyone. So I just want to say thank you so much again for your expertise and your open and honest conversations tonight. For those who are viewing, we will be posting some resources in this event as well, and you can find out more information about what we're doing, 2030 is doing, which is our young adult group, part of Mary Queen of the Apostles, by joining our Facebook page, where all this information will be there. But any final last words as we say goodbye?
Keep hope alive.
Keep hope alive. Nice. Lucian?
Virtual hugs to everyone, everywhere. And that's it. Take care of yourselves, honestly, and listen to what your needs are. And tis the season to practice vulnerability.
Great. Awesome. Great lines. Great final lines. That's awesome. Again, thank you so much. And we hope that everyone out there stay safe and healthy, and especially during these holiday times. And take care of yourself and reach out to those that need just a simple hello. So thank you very much, both of you, for coming, and thank you for everyone for watching. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Okay, we're off live. Great job. That was so good. That was so good. So good. And people are loving. We had about an average of 10 people watching, and there's a lot of likes and questions coming in, and so this will be on our Facebook, but I also will send a link to YouTube so that you guys can share it more publicly as well.
Yay.
All right.
Excellent. A lot of people.
I'll have a viewing party.
Yes. Around everyone can eat some turkey and watch this. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, you too. Stay very safe and healthy, and thank you again so much. I hope that the check should be in the mail on Monday, so it should be coming in soon. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Hope to work with you guys again.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Bye, you too.
Bye.